Welcome. Tonight, we are going to drift into a quieter corner of history. There is no rush here, no urgency, no need to hold on to every word. Just let the sound of the story move gently around you, like a low light in a darkened room. Tonight, we are going to drift into the quiet lives of diplomats during the Cold War. Not the loud speeches or the moments that filled headlines, but the long stretches in between, the slow mornings, the careful afternoons, the evenings where nothing seemed to happen, and yet everything mattered. If you're enjoying the energy here, feel free to show a little support, but only if it genuinely resonates with you. Drop a comment and tell me where you are and what hour of the night or day you're in. I always love seeing how far these moments travel. Now go ahead, dim the lights, let the room breathe. Maybe switch on a fan for that steady, calming sound. Let's drift into this together. The Cold War was often imagined as something sharp and tense, but for the people who lived inside it quietly, it unfolded at a slower pace. Especially for diplomats, their lives were shaped not by sudden action, but by waiting for cables to arrive, waiting for meetings to be scheduled, waiting for the right phrasing to emerge from a sentence that had been rewritten again and again. In cities scattered across the world, embassy buildings stood quietly along tree-lined streets. Some were grand old houses repurposed for official use. Others were newer structures, built of stone and concrete, designed to feel solid and permanent. Inside them, the air was calm and still, as if movement itself had learned to behave politely. A diplomat's day often began early, not because of excitement, but because routine had settled into the body. Morning light filtered through heavy curtains. The room was quiet except for the faint sound of traffic far below, softened by distance, and walls built thick enough to keep the world at bay. Clothing was chosen, carefully, but without drama. Dark suits, neutral ties, polished shoes that made a soft sound on wooden floors. Appearance was meant to reassure, not attract attention. In diplomacy, blending in was a kind of skill. Breakfast was unhurried. Coffee poured slowly. Bread broken in small pieces. Newspapers unfolded with care. The headlines were read, but not reacted to. What mattered more was the tone, the placement of words, the absence of certain phrases that had been present the day before. Silence, in print, could speak loudly. Embassy corridors were long and quiet in the morning. Footsteps echoed briefly and then disappeared. Offices opened their doors one by one. Desks were already neat, papers stacked precisely, pens aligned almost unconsciously by hands that had done this same motion for years. Much of a diplomat's work involved reading. Reports from home, notes from allies, observations written in measured language. Nothing was dramatic. Everything was cautious. Even emotions were translated into softer terms before being allowed onto the page. Meetings were polite, almost ritualistic. Chairs arranged carefully, cups of tea placed within reach. Conversations moved slowly, circling their subjects rather than approaching them directly. Words were chosen for how they might be interpreted weeks later, not just in the moment they were spoken. Between meetings, there was waiting, long stretches of it. Some diplomats filled the time with quiet walks around embassy gardens. Others tended small plants in their offices. A few kept personal libraries, shelves lined with novels, poetry, and history books that reminded them the world had endured other long pauses before. Lunches were simple and predictable. Familiar foods offered comfort in unfamiliar places. Conversations stayed light. Families, weather, travel plans that might or might not happen. Political discussion was saved for official settings, where it could be controlled and recorded. Afternoons passed slowly. Sunlight shifted across desks. Shadows lengthened. The sound of typewriters came and went in gentle rhythms. Every document produced was read carefully, often aloud in the mind, listening for unintended meanings hidden between the lines. The Cold War created a world where stillness felt safer than movement. Diplomats learned to appreciate calm as a form of protection. Even gestures were measured. A nod instead of a handshake. A pause instead of a reply. Evenings arrived without announcement. Lamps were switched on one by one. Some diplomats stayed late, preferring the quiet of their offices to the emptiness of apartments far from home. Others returned to families who had learned to live with unanswered questions and postponed plans. At home, life was modest. Furniture chosen for durability. Decorations kept simple. Children learned early not to repeat certain conversations outside the house. Spouses learned how to listen without asking too much. The Cold War lived softly in these homes, like a distant hum that never fully disappeared. Dinner was unremarkable in the best possible way. Soup, bread, stews that warmed more than they impressed. Afterward, evenings were spent reading, writing letters, or listening to the radio at low volume. Music offered comfort without requiring attention. Sleep came slowly but reliably. Tomorrow would be much like today, and that sameness was reassuring. This was the rhythm of diplomacy during the Cold War. Not a story of urgency, but of endurance. Of people who learned to move carefully through history, carrying responsibility quietly, one ordinary day at a time. And as the world outside continued its long, uneasy pause, these quiet lives carried on, steady and deliberate, waiting patiently for time itself to soften. The nights, for diplomats during the Cold War, often felt longer than the days. Once the lights were dimmed and the city outside settled into its quieter rhythms, a particular stillness would take hold. Curtains drawn, windows closed against unfamiliar sounds. In apartments provided by governments or quietly rented near embassies, diplomats prepared for sleep much the same way people always have, yet with an added layer of awareness that was never spoken aloud. Beds were simple, sheets carefully tucked, lamps switched off slowly, sometimes left on just long enough to finish a final page of a book. Reading at night was a habit shared by many. It helped slow the mind. It reminded them of worlds beyond policy and protocol. Sleep, when it came, was rarely troubled. The work was steady, not frantic. Tomorrow would bring another measured day, another set of papers, another polite exchange. The predictability itself was soothing. Morning returned gently. In different time zones, across continents divided by ideology but united by routine, diplomats stirred and rose again. Shaving mirrors fogged slightly. Water ran in sinks. Shoes were tied with practiced motions. The Cold War resumed, not with a clash, but with quiet continuity. Embassy buildings began to hum softly. Heating systems clicked on in colder climates. Windows were cracked open in warmer ones. Flags hung still in the early air, barely moving. Inside, secretaries arrived early. They organized correspondence, sharpened pencils, aligned stacks of documents. Their presence formed the backbone of diplomatic life, though they were rarely mentioned in official histories. They knew schedules by heart. They understood which papers needed immediate attention and which could wait. Telegrams arrived in envelopes marked confidential. They were opened carefully, read once, then again. Responses were drafted slowly. Each word was weighed, not for how it sounded, but for how it might travel. In the Cold War, messages traveled far, but emotions were kept close. Some days passed with almost nothing of note. No meetings, no urgent instructions, just observation, watching how a host country moved through its own routines. Markets opening, schools letting out, people standing in line quietly for bread or newspapers. Diplomats were trained observers. They noticed small changes. A shop that closed earlier than usual. A newspaper headline that disappeared from the front page. A public holiday suddenly emphasized more than before. These details were noted, written down, sent home in reports that were calm and neutral in tone. No speculation, no alarm, just careful description. Afternoons sometimes brought official receptions. These were formal but subdued affairs. Guests dressed conservatively. Glasses clinked softly. Conversations unfolded in practiced patterns. Safe topics first. Neutral observations. A gradual approach toward matters of interest, always careful, always polite. Food was often secondary. Small portions. Familiar dishes adjusted to local tastes. The real substance was in the exchange of presence. Being seen, being remembered. Returning home after these events, diplomats often felt tired in a quiet way. Not exhausted, but gently drained. They wrote notes while memories were fresh. Who attended? Who seemed relaxed? Who appeared distracted? At home, families adapted to this life of measured caution. Children attended local schools or international ones designed for transients. They learned early that goodbyes were part of life, that friendships might last years or just months. Spouses developed their own routines. Language classes, volunteer work, quiet social circles built around shared understanding. There was comfort in knowing that others lived the same way, balancing between cultures without fully belonging to any. Holidays were modest. Celebrations were smaller than those back home. Traditions were maintained carefully as anchors to a familiar identity. Decorations brought out from storage. Special meals prepared with ingredients sometimes difficult to find. Letters arrived from home, slower than modern communication allows, but often more thoughtful. They were read carefully, then folded and placed somewhere safe. Sometimes reread on quiet evenings when distance felt heavier. Time moved differently in diplomatic life. Weeks blurred into months. Assignments lasted years. People grew accustomed to postponing plans, to living slightly ahead or behind the present, always aware that the next transfer was already waiting somewhere in the future. Yet there was peace in this structure. The world felt unpredictable, but their days were not. There was reassurance in repetition, comfort in knowing what tomorrow would bring. Even moments of tension were softened by protocol. If disagreements arose, they were handled privately, calmly, over cups of tea or carefully prepared meals. Voices rarely rose. Silence often spoke more clearly than words. Behind closed doors, diplomats sometimes allowed themselves small expressions of frustration. A sigh, a long pause, a quiet remark shared only with a trusted colleague. Then composure returned. Professionalism restored. The Cold War was built on restraint as much as rivalry, and diplomats embodied that restraint in their daily lives. As years passed, some grew older in the service. Hair grayed. Movement slowed slightly. Younger diplomats arrived, learning the same habits, absorbing the same quiet discipline. Knowledge was passed down not through lectures, but through example. How to wait, how to listen, how to say very little, very carefully. The cities around them changed slowly. New buildings rose. Old ones were renovated. Political posters appeared and disappeared. Seasons turned, marking time more gently than headlines ever could. In winter, snow softened streets and muffled sound. Embassies felt especially insulated then, warm and still inside thick walls. In summer, windows were opened. Light lingered longer in the evenings. The pace relaxed further. There were moments of reflection, often unspoken. Late at night, sitting alone with a cup of tea or a book half finished, diplomats sometimes thought about the role they played. Not heroes, not decision-makers in the dramatic sense, but caretakers of calm. Their work was to keep doors open, to prevent misunderstandings from becoming something worse, to hold space for conversation, even when agreement seemed far away. This sense of quiet purpose sustained them. And so, day after day, year after year, the quiet lives of diplomats continued. Unremarkable on the surface, profound in their steadiness. As you rest now, let that steadiness settle around you. Let the slow rhythm of their days soften your thoughts. There is nothing urgent here, nothing demanding attention, just the gentle passage of time, moving forward calmly, patiently, one quiet moment after another. In many ways, the most defining feature of diplomatic life during the Cold War was not what happened, but how little happened on the surface. Days blended into one another with a soft sameness that was neither dull nor exciting, but quietly dependable. For those living it, this rhythm became familiar, almost comforting. The world beyond the embassy walls might shift and tremble, but inside, the cadence remained slow and measured. Mornings brought the same sounds. The gentle rustle of papers, the low murmur of voices speaking carefully in hallways, doors opening and closing with a deliberate softness, as if loud noises themselves might disrupt something fragile. Diplomats often walked the same routes each day, from residence to embassy, from office to meeting room, from desk to window. These paths became well-worn, both physically and mentally. Along the way, they observed their surroundings without drawing attention to themselves. A cafe owner who remembered their usual order, a guard who nodded silently each morning, a park bench that caught the afternoon sun just right. These small details grounded them in places that were never fully home, yet never entirely foreign either. Many embassies maintained libraries filled with reports, reference books, and carefully curated histories. These rooms were quiet sanctuaries. The smell of old paper and polished wood lingered in the air. Diplomats sometimes retreated there during slow afternoons, not always to read, but simply to sit among accumulated knowledge and let time pass gently. Writing was constant. Letters, reports, notes, drafts that would be revised repeatedly. Writing forced clarity. It slowed thought. It turned fleeting impressions into steady records. Fountain pens glided across paper. Typewriters clicked in soft, rhythmic patterns. The sound was soothing, almost meditative. When winter arrived, routines adjusted slightly. Coats were heavier. Meetings began with a few moments of warmth gathering, gloves set aside, hands wrapped around warm cups. Snow outside blurred the edges of cities, making everything feel quieter, more distant. During long winters, diplomats sometimes felt time stretching. Evenings grew longer. Darkness arrived earlier. Radio broadcasts filled the silence with familiar voices and music from home. These sounds offered comfort, reminding listeners that the world beyond borders continued in ordinary ways. In warmer months, life unfolded more openly. Windows were left ajar. Conversations drifted softly through courtyards. Gardens became places of quiet reflection. Some embassies hosted small outdoor gatherings, understated and polite, where conversation flowed gently under open skies. Children played quietly nearby, learning languages by listening, absorbing cultures by living among them rather than studying them. They adapted quickly, often more easily than adults. To them, this life of moving and waiting felt normal. Spouses formed subtle networks of support. They exchanged recipes, advice, and understanding glances. They knew which questions not to ask. They understood that patience was a shared skill. There were moments when news from home arrived that shifted the emotional weight of the day. Elections, crises, changes in leadership. Even then, reactions were restrained. Diplomats read, absorbed, and adjusted their tone accordingly. Emotional responses were private. Professional responses were public. Official dinners followed strict patterns. Seating arrangements were planned carefully. Menus were neutral and familiar. Toasts were brief and cautious. These gatherings were less about celebration and more about presence, about maintaining lines of communication in a world defined by division. Returning home afterward, diplomats often felt a quiet relief. Shoes removed. Jackets hung neatly. The weight of formality set aside for a few hours. Some wrote letters. Others simply sat in silence, listening to the hum of the city at night. Sleep came easily to those who accepted the pace of this life. Dreams were often unremarkable. Familiar faces. Repeated places. The mind mirrored the steady rhythm of waking hours. Years passed this way. Assignments ended. New ones began. Goodbyes were brief and composed. Packing became efficient. Boxes labeled. Memories folded away alongside documents and books. Arriving in a new country, diplomats repeated the process. Learning new streets, new customs, new rhythms. The Cold War followed them, quiet and persistent, shaping their work, but rarely their emotions. Looking back, many would later describe this period not in terms of fear or tension, but in terms of stillness. A long pause in history, filled with people whose job it was to keep that pause intact. They were not the ones remembered in dramatic photographs or bold headlines. Yet their presence mattered. Their quiet discipline mattered. As you lie here now, let that sense of calm endurance surround you. Imagine days unfolding gently, one after another, without urgency. Imagine a world held together not by noise, but by restraint. There is nothing you need to resolve tonight. Nothing pressing your attention. Just the slow, steady movement of time, carrying everything forward at its own gentle pace. And in that calm, you can rest that as the years of the Cold War moved forward, diplomats became experts in the art of adjustment. They adjusted to new leaders, new policies, new phrases that entered official language and quietly replaced older ones. They adjusted to shifting alliances that were discussed carefully and implemented even more carefully. And perhaps most of all, they adjusted to time itself, learning how to live comfortably within long stretches of uncertainty. There were seasons when the workload felt lighter, when weeks passed with little more than routine correspondence and formal visits. During these periods, diplomats settled into deeper patterns of observation. They walked a little more slowly. They listened a little longer. They noticed how cities breathed. In some capitals, mornings began with church bells echoing softly through streets still half asleep. In others, the day started with the distant hum of traffic or the call of vendors setting up their stalls. These sounds became part of the diplomats' internal clocks, signals that another day of careful calm had begun. Offices reflected the personalities of those who occupied them. though always within narrow limits. A framed photograph from home, a small souvenir from a previous posting, a plant positioned near a window. These modest touches softened the formality of the space, making it more livable without making it personal in any obvious way. Conversations among colleagues were often understated. They spoke in measured tones, even when discussing topics of great importance. Humor, when it appeared, was dry and subtle. A raised eyebrow, a faint smile, shared understanding expressed without words. There were moments when frustration surfaced, but even then it was controlled. A report delayed, a meeting postponed, a message that arrived too late to be useful. These were accepted as part of the rhythm. Complaints were rare and brief. Diplomats learned that progress, in their world, was often invisible. Agreements were not always celebrated. Sometimes they were simply noted and filed away. Success meant nothing had gone wrong. That tension had not escalated. That silence had been maintained. Outside the office, daily life continued with quiet regularity. Groceries were purchased at familiar shops. Laundry was done on certain days. Evenings followed predictable patterns. The ordinary tasks of living offered grounding, a reminder that beyond politics, life still moved gently forward. Cultural events provided moments of quiet enrichment. Concerts attended without fanfare. Art exhibitions explored slowly. Museums visited during off hours, when rooms were nearly empty and footsteps echoed softly. These experiences offered perspective, reminding diplomats that history was vast and patient. Some found comfort in routine exercise, long walks, gentle swims, simple movements repeated regularly, mirroring the repetitive calm of their work. Physical rhythm supported mental steadiness. Letters and calls from home were treasured, but also carefully managed. Emotions stirred by distance were acknowledged privately, then set aside. The work required focus. Personal feelings were allowed space, but never allowed to spill outward. As time passed, diplomats developed a particular way of speaking, one shaped by caution and nuance. Sentences were structured to leave room for interpretation. Statements were balanced, rarely absolute. This language became second nature, extending even into personal conversations. Children grew accustomed to this environment. They learned early how to listen more than speak. They observed how adults navigated situations with calm restraint. These lessons stayed with them, shaping their own sense of patience and adaptability. Holidays came and went, marked by understated celebrations. A small gathering, a familiar meal prepared with care. Traditions adapted to new surroundings. These moments of continuity were cherished quietly. The Cold War itself seemed endless while it lasted. A long stretch of time defined more by what did not happen than by what did. Diplomats lived inside this space, holding it steady day by day, year by year. They understood that history often moved not through sudden turns, but through prolonged stillness. That maintaining balance required constant, quiet effort. As you listen now, imagine one of those diplomats sitting at a desk late in the evening. The room is softly lit. Papers are neatly stacked. Outside, the city has settled into nighttime calm. There is no sense of urgency, only the quiet satisfaction of another day navigated carefully. The clock ticks softly. Time passes, and in that gentle passing, there is peace. Over time, the quiet discipline of diplomatic life became something that settled into the body. It showed itself in posture, in the way diplomats sat comfortably through long meetings without shifting too much. It appeared in how they listened, allowing pauses to stretch without feeling the need to fill them. Silence was not awkward here. Silence was useful. Silence allowed meaning to surface slowly. In offices across the world, lamps cast warm pools of light onto desks late into the evening. The outside world dimmed, but the embassy buildings remained softly awake. Not busy, not tense, just gently alert. Someone might still be at a desk, rereading a report for the third or fourth time, ensuring that every phrase carried exactly the right weight. There was an unspoken understanding that words, once released, could travel far beyond their original intention. So they were handled carefully, like fragile objects passed from one set of hands to another. Diplomats learned to speak in layers. What was said publicly often differed slightly from what was said privately, and both differed again from what was written down. This was not deception, but adaptation. Each space required its own tone, its own degree of openness. Even friendships followed this pattern. Bonds formed slowly. Trust was built over years, not weeks. Colleagues shared experiences, routines, and quiet moments rather than personal confessions. There was closeness, but it was measured. When crises occurred somewhere in the world, the reaction inside diplomatic circles remained calm on the surface. Extra meetings were scheduled. Messages were exchanged more frequently. But voices stayed level. Movement stayed controlled. Panic had no place here. After work, some diplomats returned to residences that felt almost timeless. Furniture chosen to be durable rather than fashionable. Walls painted in neutral colors. Rooms arranged for practicality and quiet comfort. These spaces became refuges from the careful performance required outside. Evenings were often spent doing very little. Reading, writing letters, listening to music played softly. These simple acts helped release the tension that accumulated slowly, almost imperceptibly, throughout the day. Sleep was valued. Rest was considered essential to clarity. Late nights were avoided unless absolutely necessary. The work demanded patience, and patience required energy conserved carefully. Weekends offered a slight loosening of formality. Casual walks through parks, visits to markets, quiet meals shared with family or close friends. These moments allowed diplomats to reconnect with ordinary life, even as they remained always somewhat apart from it. Travel was frequent but rarely glamorous. Trains, planes, long waits in terminals, hotels that blurred together in memory. Packing and unpacking became efficient, almost automatic. Personal belongings were kept minimal, ready to move at a moment's notice. Each posting left its mark. A phrase picked up from a local language. A preference for certain foods. A subtle change in perspective. Diplomats carried these traces with them from country to country, quietly accumulating layers of experience. As decades passed, some began to sense that the Cold War itself was slowly changing. The tone of conversations shifted slightly. New words entered circulation. Old fears softened, though they never fully disappeared. Still, the daily routines remained. Morning briefings, careful writing, polite meetings. The work continued at its steady pace, regardless of broader shifts. Looking back, many diplomats would later struggle to describe what they had done during those years. There were few dramatic stories to tell. No clear moments of triumph or failure. Just a long sequence of days spent maintaining balance. And yet, there was pride in that. Pride in having contributed to stability through restraint. Pride in having chosen patience over reaction. As you rest now, let that sense of quiet purpose settle in. Imagine a world sustained not by loud gestures, but by calm consistency. Imagine people whose greatest achievement was preventing disruption by simply being present, attentive, and careful. The hours pass softly. The story continues without urgency. There is nowhere else to be. Just this moment. And rest.as the Cold War stretched on. Diplomats became intimately familiar with the feeling of time moving slowly, but never standing still. They learned to sense change not through announcements, but through atmosphere. A meeting that ended a few minutes earlier than usual. A handshake held just a little longer. A phrase that softened where it once felt rigid. These were the signals they learned to notice, the quiet indicators that something subtle was shifting beneath the surface. In embassies, calendars filled with events that looked important on paper but unfolded gently in reality. Cultural exchanges, formal visits, anniversary commemorations marked by restrained speeches and polite applause. These occasions reinforced continuity more than change, reminding everyone involved that stability itself was an achievement. Diplomats often kept journals, though not the kind meant for publication. Small notebooks filled with observations written in careful handwriting. Descriptions of moods, environments, and conversations that might not seem significant at the time, but felt worth preserving. These private records helped them process a life lived largely between the lines. The architecture around them reflected the same sensibility. Buildings designed to be solid rather than expressive. Offices arranged for efficiency and discretion. Even decorative elements were chosen for calm neutrality. Nothing too bold, nothing too personal. In some cities, embassies occupied historic buildings that carried echoes of earlier centuries. High ceilings, worn staircases, tall windows overlooking streets that had seen many eras come and go. Working in these spaces offered perspective. Empires had risen and fallen here. The Cold War was only another chapter. During quiet afternoons, diplomats sometimes found themselves gazing out of windows, watching life unfold below. People walking dogs, children playing, vendors closing their stalls. These scenes were grounding reminders that most lives continued unaffected by global tension. There was comfort in that ordinariness. Language learning was a constant task. Even those already fluent continued to refine their understanding, aware that nuance mattered. A word chosen slightly incorrectly could alter the tone of an entire exchange. Practice was steady and patient. Mistakes, when they happened, were handled discreetly. Corrections were made quietly. Lessons were absorbed without blame. The goal was always continuity, not acknowledgement. As years turned into decades, diplomats grew used to living with unanswered questions. Would the situation improve? Would it worsen? Would it end at all? These questions lingered, but they did not dominate daily thought. Focusing too much on the unknown was unproductive. Instead, attention remained on what could be controlled. Tone, timing, presence. Families adapted alongside them. Children grew up in a world where borders were temporary and home was defined more by people than by place. They learned flexibility early. They learned that calm could exist even in uncertain environments. Spouses often became quiet experts in cultural navigation themselves. They understood local customs, social expectations, and subtle boundaries. Their support was essential, though rarely acknowledged publicly. The passing of time was marked by small rituals, annual evaluations, the arrival of new colleagues, farewell gatherings that were understated but sincere, a shared meal, a few kind words. Then life moved on. Even moments of personal significance were tempered by the nature of the work. Birthdays celebrated modestly. Anniversaries marked quietly. These moments were meaningful, but never extravagant. The Cold War required endurance more than brilliance. Diplomats understood this deeply. Their success lay in consistency, in showing up day after day with the same calm demeanor. As the broader world began to change, as new ideas and possibilities slowly entered conversation, diplomats adjusted as they always had. Gradually, carefully, without spectacle, they continued their routines, even as history prepared to shift direction. And now, as you listen, you may feel that same steady rhythm settling in. The sense that time can move forward gently, without pressure. That not every moment requires action. Let the quiet of these lives surround you. Let their patience become your own. There is no hurry here, only the soft passage of another moment, and then another, carrying you calmly toward rest. The rhythm of a diplomat's life often blended seamlessly into the seasons. Winter brought soft light that filtered through frost-laced windows, making the halls of embassies feel warmer and more enclosed. Snow muffled the sounds of the city outside, creating a sense of separation from the world beyond the walls. Inside, desks were organized with care, papers stacked in precise order, and the gentle hum of heating systems filled the background with a comforting consistency. Spring, by contrast, introduced longer days and a subtle liveliness. The streets below began to show the first hints of green. Trees along avenues stretched new leaves toward the sun. Embassy gardens, often small but meticulously tended, flourished. Diplomats found quiet pleasure in observing blooms open slowly, a reminder that life moved forward naturally, regardless of politics or tension. Walks through these spaces became meditative, moments to notice details often overlooked. A soft breeze, the scent of flowers, the distant chatter of children in parks nearby. Summer brought warmth, open windows, and a slightly different pace. Evening light lingered longer, filtering into offices and residences, painting walls in soft amber tones. Diplomats took the opportunity to stretch the day into longer hours of observation and reflection. Streets carried sounds of distant laughter and occasional music, muted and softened by distance and polite respect. In these warmer months, outdoor gatherings were possible. Small dinners or tea parties with select colleagues offered subtle, unspoken exchanges of information, framed in civility and the quiet rhythm of social custom. Autumn, with its muted palette, signaled preparation and reflection. Leaves drifted slowly from trees, carpeting sidewalks in gentle layers of orange, gold, and brown. The shift in the natural world mirrored the internal cadence of diplomatic life. Reports were reviewed carefully, reflecting on months past. Calendars were checked for upcoming assignments or anniversaries. The air carried the scent of wood fires or damp stone, grounding those who had spent years navigating spaces defined by caution and restraint. Daily routines were shaped by small, almost imperceptible habits. Morning briefings began the day with quiet efficiency. Reports were read attentively, sometimes aloud to oneself, ensuring no nuance went unnoticed. Notes were taken in careful handwriting, preserving observations that might later prove relevant, even if their significance was not immediately apparent. Typing or writing on paper created a soft rhythm that became both work and gentle meditation. Meals were a source of calm as well. Breakfasts were deliberate and unhurried. A cup of coffee warmed in the hand, bread torn slowly, the newspaper unfolded and read with attention to detail. Lunches were light and often accompanied by quiet conversation, discussing practical matters rather than passion or politics. Evenings allowed for small indulgences, a well-cooked meal, a quiet moment by a window, or listening to music at a low volume. These activities were grounding, reminders of ordinary life amidst extraordinary circumstances. Travel punctuated the rhythm but rarely disrupted it. Journeys were undertaken methodically, suitcases packed with precision, tickets carefully reviewed, and schedules memorized. Arrival in a new city was always followed by observation, learning the streets, noting local rhythms, understanding the subtle ways life differed. Even in foreign lands, diplomats cultivated a sense of calm stability. Their routines adapted, but their composure remained constant. Professional exchanges were guided by subtlety. Conversations were measured, words chosen for accuracy and tone. Meetings that might seem tense to outsiders often unfolded like slow dances of civility, pauses, gentle acknowledgments, and careful phrasing. Success was measured in continuity, in the preservation of communication, and in preventing misunderstandings from escalating. Diplomats became adept at creating an environment where nothing erupted, where patience and quiet understanding dominated over urgency or spectacle. In quieter moments, personal reflection became a gentle companion. Journals were kept, not as records for others, but as ways to process a life lived between observation and restraint. Reflections on the world, on small gestures observed during the day, and on lessons learned from colleagues, became anchors of understanding. These private records reinforced calmness, a slow reminder that life continued regardless of immediate pressures. Even small personal comforts were chosen carefully. A favorite book left open on a desk, a plant nurtured near a window to catch the light, a soft rug underfoot to ease long hours of standing. These details, seemingly trivial, contributed to a sense of order and predictability, reinforcing the tranquility necessary to navigate a life built on patience and observation. As you rest now, imagine yourself moving through this world of slow, deliberate rhythm. Picture mornings illuminated with soft light filtering through tall windows. Imagine afternoons unfolding quietly, punctuated by gentle conversations and soft footsteps along polished hallways. Envision evenings stretched gently into the night, filled with reading, reflection, and the muted comfort of familiar routines. Let the subtle patterns of this life wrap around you, a quiet reminder that calm persistence can shape the world in ways that noise and haste cannot. Feel the slow passage of time carrying you along, steady and unhurried, guiding you gently toward rest and the soft embrace of sleep. The life of a diplomat during the Cold War was as much about observation as it was about action. Every day offered subtle lessons in noticing what was present and what was quietly absent. A missing newspaper headline, a conversation that ended a beat too early, a colleague who lingered a moment longer by the window. These small shifts, almost imperceptible, were carefully noted, cataloged, and stored for future reference. Even the architecture around diplomats contributed to their rhythm. Embassies, whether grand stone edifices or modestly designed modern buildings, carried their own quiet personality. High ceilings allowed light to filter softly, echoing the steps of those moving through long corridors. Thick walls muffled the outside world, creating an almost private universe within which careful observation could take place. Carpets absorbed sound. Heavy doors closed gently, maintaining a steady hush that became a natural backdrop for work and reflection. Telegrams and cables arrived throughout the day, demanding attention but rarely urgency. Each one was handled with precision. Open carefully, read twice, sometimes thrice. Draft responses were written slowly, revised, then reviewed again before being sent. The flow of communication moved deliberately, creating a gentle rhythm that defined the workday. There was no rush, only steady attention, and a measured pace that emphasized clarity and restraint. Diplomats' personal lives intertwined seamlessly with this structure. Children learned to adapt, playing quietly, reading, observing the same subtle rhythms their parents followed. Spouses, too, found ways to create pockets of comfort and social connection, often through small networks of others living the same quiet life. Tea afternoons, short walks, cultural excursions, they all served to anchor life within a predictable, gentle framework. Evenings often brought the most peaceful hours. After the day's correspondence and meetings, diplomats might take a walk along nearby streets, noticing details often overlooked by hurried passers-by. The angle of sunlight on a stone facade, the scent of a bakery cooling its bread, the way shadows shifted under a street lamp. In these quiet moments, they could feel the city breathe and pulse in time with their own careful steps. Back inside their residences, evenings were spent in reflective calm. Books were opened at a measured pace, letters written slowly and thoughtfully, music listened to at a gentle volume. These practices were not indulgent, but necessary, helping sustain patience and clarity in a life defined by careful attention. Light in a room shifted gradually as the sun set, and the soft hum of appliances or distant traffic became a lullaby, underscoring the calm flow of life. When winter arrived, the cold created a softer, almost hushed world. Snow dampened sounds. Streets glimmered with frost. Within embassies, warmth from radiators, soft lighting, and orderly desks created a cocoon of stability. Even simple acts, like making tea or writing in a journal, took on a meditative quality in this slow, insulated rhythm. The longer the years passed, the more diplomats recognized that subtlety was their strongest tool. Not grand gestures or bold moves, but consistent presence, careful listening, and measured action shaped the outcomes that mattered. Decisions were often made without spectacle, through quiet negotiation, small adjustments, and patient attention. The world outside might shift, but within the spaces they inhabited, stability prevailed. At times, minor celebrations marked continuity and connection. Birthdays were observed quietly. Small tokens or gestures of appreciation were shared among colleagues. These events, though understated, reinforced bonds and reminded everyone that human connection persisted even amidst the careful protocols of diplomacy. Late nights often found diplomats at their desks, reviewing notes or rereading communications. The work was never frantic. The pace was gentle. Each action had its place. Each day folded smoothly into the next. Outside, the city slept or moved with muted steps, leaving rooms bathed in soft lamplight, a sanctuary for reflection and quiet preparation for tomorrow. The sense of time in this life was unusual, stretched yet continuous, cyclical yet evolving. Days repeated in similar patterns, yet each carried small differences, a new word heard in conversation, a weather pattern, a minor adjustment to schedules. These subtleties became markers of memory, reminders that life unfolded steadily, even when history itself seemed frozen in tense uncertainty. And so, the diplomats continued, a life measured and meticulous, filled with small observations, careful words, and gentle routines. In this quiet diligence, they shaped the subtle currents of a divided world, holding space for communication, understanding, and slow, deliberate action. As you listen now, let that same rhythm settle into your body. Imagine gentle corridors, warm light, soft footsteps, and quiet streets. Let the calm passage of time, unhurried and patient, carry you deeper into stillness. Feel the slow cadence of these lives wrap around you, guiding your mind toward rest and allowing sleep to arrive softly, like the quiet folding of a long, peaceful day. Even in the midst of international tension, diplomats found ways to cultivate a sense of continuity. Personal routines became anchors, grounding them in a world that was otherwise defined by uncertainty. Mornings often began with quiet observation, the first light of day spilling across polished floors, the soft murmur of traffic far below, the faint scent of coffee brewing in a nearby kitchen. These simple markers of daily life offered reassurance, a gentle reminder that the world, in some small ways, remained predictable. Many diplomats kept small journals, noting what might seem insignificant to outsiders but held subtle importance in their line of work. A casual remark overheard at a reception, a pattern noticed in the newspaper, a fleeting glance that suggested mood rather than words. Each detail was recorded with care, often revisited later to form a quiet archive of perception. These personal notes became both guide and companion, offering structure to days that might otherwise feel endlessly repetitive. Work itself flowed at a steady, deliberate pace. Reports were reviewed slowly, redrafted, and read aloud to oneself to catch subtle shifts in meaning. Telegraphs and cables arrived punctually, and responses were crafted with patience, often rewritten several times to ensure that tone, phrasing, and nuance conveyed exactly the intended message. The careful rhythm of this process created an almost meditative environment, where thought and action moved hand in hand, yet always without rush. Evenings offered spaces for reflection and gentle routine. A quiet dinner, the soft flicker of a lamp, or a long walk through a familiar neighborhood allowed the mind to rest. Music played softly, pages of books turned slowly, letters composed with attention and care. Families adapted to these tempos as well, learning to move gently, speak thoughtfully, and respect the calm boundaries set by the work. Children absorbed lessons in patience and observation, watching their parents navigate the world with subtle precision. Weekends were for small reprieves. Short walks in local parks, visits to markets, or leisurely rides in trams and buses offered perspective. Though the broader political world might seem vast and turbulent, within these spaces, movement was unhurried and life carried forward with quiet assurance. Even a casual conversation at a local cafe became a lesson in tone, body language, and the soft rhythms of human interaction. Over the years, diplomats learned to cultivate a sense of interior stability. They became attuned to the ebb and flow of the world around them, noticing small cues and patterns that others might overlook. A flower opening in a garden, the angle of sunlight at a particular hour, the distant laughter of children at play. These subtle moments of beauty and continuity provided solace and a reminder that life, despite its complexities, moved steadily forward. Assignments changed over time, bringing new cities, cultures, and colleagues into daily life. Each relocation required adjustment, yet the underlying routines remained constant. Careful observation, measured communication, quiet reflection, and attention to the smallest details. New colleagues learned the same rhythms, often through observation rather than instruction, absorbing the gentle pace and the subtle art of patience that defined this work. In colder months, snow and frost transformed the familiar streets into landscapes of quiet contemplation. Sounds were muted, and lights softened across pavements and rooftops. Diplomats walked carefully, noticing how footprints marked a temporary path across the pristine ground, only to vanish later. These moments of stillness reinforced the sense of order and patience that permeated daily life. As history slowly shifted, so too did the tenor of diplomatic life. Small changes in leadership, policy, or global sentiment were observed with attention but rarely reacted to hastily. Adaptation was gradual, deliberate, and almost imperceptible. Even as the world outside fluctuated, the internal rhythm of embassy life maintained continuity. Late nights often found diplomats alone at their desks, reviewing reports, rereading letters, or reflecting quietly. The soft ticking of a clock, the distant murmur of city streets, and the gentle glow of lamplight formed a backdrop for thought and introspection. Here, time stretched in a measured way, allowing careful consideration, recollection, and preparation for the day to come. Through it all, the essence of diplomacy remained constant: presence, observation, restraint, and patience. These quiet, deliberate actions, repeated day after day, formed the invisible threads that held together communication, understanding, and stability in a divided world. As you listen now, imagine yourself enveloped by this steady rhythm. Feel the calm progression of days, the gentle unfolding of hours, and the reassuring constancy of measured, attentive care. Let the quiet flow of this narrative guide you deeper into relaxation, carrying you softly toward rest, where sleep arrives gently, unhurried, and unbroken. With each passing year, diplomats became increasingly attuned to the subtle pulse of the world around them. Their days were defined less by dramatic events and more by an almost imperceptible attentiveness to small shifts in environment, mood, and circumstance. Even the simplest interactions, a brief nod from a colleague, the way sunlight slanted across a polished desk, the soft hum of a distant tram, were noticed and absorbed, adding layers of understanding that no document or report could fully capture. Morning routines were a gentle ritual. Curtains drawn back just enough to welcome the first light, a cup of coffee held in hands warmed by porcelain, and a newspaper unfolded slowly. Attention focused not only on what was written, but on what had changed since yesterday. A phrase rearranged, a story placed differently, the absence of an expected report. These became points of quiet reflection, small markers in a world that demanded constant vigilance without overt tension. Meetings continued to be understated exercises in patience. Chairs arranged with precision. Notes placed carefully on polished tables. Conversation flowed deliberately, circling topics with courtesy and restraint. Diplomats learned to read pauses as carefully as words. A silence could convey more than several paragraphs of speech if one only knew how to listen. Afternoons often included moments of personal pause. Some diplomats retreated to libraries or offices, reading volumes of history, literature, or poetry, absorbing narratives that mirrored the slow unfolding of their own lives. Others walked through gardens or along quiet streets, observing the subtle rhythms of urban life, the patterns of footsteps on cobblestones, the gentle sway of trees in the wind, the quiet exchange of greetings between neighbors. These moments reinforced a sense of continuity, a reminder that life moved forward steadily, even when the wider political world seemed unpredictable. Evenings brought their own kind of serenity. Lamps glowed softly, casting warm light across desks and living spaces. Dinner was deliberate but modest. Familiar dishes prepared with care, often shared with a spouse or close colleague. Conversation was gentle, light, and grounding, seldom venturing into topics that might disturb the calm cultivated throughout the day. Music, faint and soothing, might play in the background. Pages of a book turned slowly. A pen traced lines in a journal. The day ended in quiet reflection, a soft punctuation that prepared the mind for rest. Weekends offered subtle opportunities for exploration and connection. Short walks in nearby parks, visits to museums during off-peak hours, and gentle observations of local customs allowed diplomats to experience life at a slightly slower pace. Even casual conversations with neighbors or shopkeepers became exercises in careful attention, a way to remain connected while preserving discretion. Children and families adapted gracefully to this life. Play was often quiet, indoors or in secluded gardens. Learning new languages, adapting to shifting social expectations, and observing routines carefully became natural parts of daily life. Spouses found ways to create small networks of support and companionship, sustaining each other through shared understanding of the slow, methodical demands of diplomatic life. Travel punctuated routines, though it rarely disrupted them. Suitcases were packed efficiently. Trains and planes were used with quiet purpose. Arrival in a new city was accompanied by careful observation of streets, customs, and local rhythms. Adjustment was gradual, deliberate, and almost imperceptible, with routines quickly re-established once a sense of stability returned. Throughout these years, the practice of writing remained central. Reports, letters, and notes were composed with precision and care. Drafts were revised repeatedly, each word chosen for clarity, nuance, and tone. Even the act of writing itself became meditative, providing structure and rhythm that mirrored the wider cadence of daily life. Late nights often found diplomats at their desks, reviewing correspondence or rereading notes. The city outside was quiet, streets nearly empty. The distant hum of nighttime activity softened into background music for thought and reflection. Lamps cast pools of warm light onto carefully arranged papers, creating spaces of focus and calm. These hours, though long, were never hurried, and they shaped the unspoken continuity that defined life during this period. The Cold War, for those living quietly within it, was less about dramatic events than about sustained observation, gentle restraint, and enduring patience. Diplomats became masters of subtlety, navigating a world divided by ideology while maintaining stability, one quiet, deliberate day at a time. As you listen now, allow the gentle, measured pace of their lives to settle over you. Picture long, calm corridors, soft lamplight on polished desks, and quiet streets seen from embassy windows. Feel the soft rhythm of daily life moving steadily, unhurried, and let it guide your mind and body toward deep, restful sleep. The passage of years brought a deepened sense of rhythm and awareness to the lives of diplomats. They moved through the world with a patient attentiveness that shaped both their work and their perception of everyday life. Small details became markers of continuity. The soft shift of light across a desk in the morning, the familiar creak of a wooden staircase, or the way the wind stirred the leaves just outside an embassy window. These subtle moments offered reassurance, a quiet pulse that measured time gently yet steadily. Morning routines remained understated yet purposeful. Curtains were drawn back to welcome the early light, coffee warmed in the hands, and newspapers unfolded with deliberate care. Attention lingered not only on what was printed, but on the patterns, absences, and changes that might signify something quietly significant. Each observation, however minor it seemed, was folded into the diplomat's careful understanding of the world. Meetings unfolded like quiet dances of civility. Chairs arranged in deliberate order, papers placed with precision, voices steady and measured. Silence was as important as speech. A pause could communicate more than several carefully chosen words. In these spaces, diplomats learned patience as a practice and observation as a form of subtle influence. Afternoons offered respite and reflection. Some retreated to small embassy gardens, watching sunlight shift across foliage or noticing the first hints of seasonal change. Others lingered in libraries, absorbing histories and poetry, drawing calm from the measured words of long-past observers. The act of watching, reading, and absorbing became its own kind of stability, a gentle counterbalance to the uncertainties of global politics. Evenings were quiet and deliberate. Lamps cast soft circles of light across desks and living rooms. Dinners were modest, familiar, and comforting. Conversation remained gentle, often centered on daily life rather than politics, allowing for connection without disturbance. Music played softly. Books were read slowly. Letters were written with careful attention to tone and nuance. The day concluded in reflective calm, preparing both mind and body for rest. Weekends and days of lesser demand were opportunities for subtle engagement with the world beyond the embassy. Walks along quiet streets, visits to museums at off hours, and observation of local customs provided perspective and renewed attention to detail. Conversations with neighbors or shopkeepers were gentle exercises in listening, understanding, and noting what might otherwise go unnoticed. Families adapted seamlessly to this environment. Children learned to play quietly, observe patiently, and respect the subtle rhythms of adult life. Spouses maintained networks of companionship and support, sharing the same understanding of patience, attentiveness, and quiet endurance. Together, these practices formed the foundation of a life that balanced personal care with professional discretion. Travel was a consistent but measured interruption to routine. Diplomatic journeys involved meticulous planning and efficient packing. Arrivals in new cities were followed by careful observation of streets, customs, and social rhythms. Adjustment was gradual, deliberate, and precise, and once a sense of familiarity returned, routines resumed with steady continuity. Throughout, writing remained central. Reports, letters, and notes were drafted with extreme care, often revised multiple times to ensure tone, clarity, and precision. The process of writing was itself meditative, a rhythm that mirrored the wider cadence of life. Pens glided across paper. Typewriters clicked softly in the background. These sounds became part of the unhurried environment, reinforcing calm and focus. Night brought a final layer of tranquility. City streets grew quiet, distant hums softened into background sound, and lamps illuminated desks and rooms with gentle warmth. Late night. Reflection, rereading correspondence, or jotting small notes became habitual acts of closure, a way to mark the passage of another day lived with care. Even as the Cold War persisted, diplomats embodied constancy. Their work was often invisible, their actions subtle, and their influence quiet. Yet through steady observation, careful communication, and patient endurance, they maintained continuity in a world defined by division. Their lives were shaped by restraint, subtlety, and an intimate understanding of time as a slow, unfolding process. As you listen now, allow the gentle rhythm of these lives to guide your own. Imagine long, quiet corridors, warm light falling softly across polished desks, and streets observed from a serene distance. Let the calm cadence of days and nights, marked by attention, patience, and quiet presence, carry you gently toward rest, where sleep arrives softly, unhurried, and complete. Seasons passed gently in the lives of diplomats, each bringing its own subtle markers of time. Winter arrived with soft frost that dulled the edges of the city, muffling footsteps and distant traffic. Snow gathered lightly on rooftops and streets, creating a quiet world that felt slightly removed from the busier rhythm beyond embassy walls. Inside, the warmth of radiators and the soft glow of lamps created a cocoon of calm, where work could continue without hurry and evenings could be spent in measured reflection. Spring brought a different kind of attentiveness. Buds unfurled slowly on trees, gardens showed the first green shoots, and the light shifted to longer, gentler afternoons. Diplomats often used this time to take quiet walks, noticing how the city breathed, observing patterns in everyday life that might have otherwise gone unnoticed. A shop that opened at the same hour every morning, a flower that appeared at the corner of a courtyard, a child learning to ride a bicycle along a quiet street. These observations, small and deliberate, became an intrinsic part of the rhythm of daily life. Summer offered warmth and a longer span of daylight. Windows could be opened to let in gentle breezes. Embassy gardens became spaces for quiet conversation and reflection. Small, understated social gatherings took place outdoors, where tone and body language communicated more than words. Evenings lingered in soft amber light, allowing for extended hours of reading, reflection, or gentle walks along familiar streets. These days were punctuated by the soft hum of the city, distant music, and the occasional laughter that floated through open windows. Autumn introduced muted colors, cooler air, and a sense of preparation. Leaves drifted slowly to the ground, carpeting streets in quiet golds and reds. The changing season became a gentle marker of time, a reminder that continuity existed even as the natural world evolved. Diplomats returned to their offices and routines with renewed focus, reviewing reports, organizing correspondence, and preparing for the months ahead. The small details of life carried profound importance. Morning rituals, the pouring of coffee, the unfolding of newspapers, the careful stacking of documents, offered consistency. Even routine meals were approached with care, the act of eating slowed into something almost ceremonial. These simple actions provided a quiet anchor amid the broader currents of international affairs. Children and families adapted naturally to this rhythm. Play was gentle, indoors or in private gardens. Learning new languages and adapting to varying social expectations became part of ordinary life. Spouses cultivated subtle networks of support, ensuring companionship and continuity, while quietly sharing the understanding that patience, observation, and restraint were central to the household's equilibrium. Travel, though frequent, was approached methodically. Luggage was packed efficiently. Journeys were planned carefully, with attention paid to schedules, connections, and accommodations. Arriving in a new city always demanded careful observation, noting street patterns, understanding local customs, observing subtle social cues. Adjustments were made gradually, almost imperceptibly, and once familiarity settled in, the steady rhythm of work and life resumed. Writing remained a central, grounding practice. Reports, letters, and notes were composed with precision, often revised multiple times to ensure clarity and tone. The act of writing itself became a quiet meditation, a way to reinforce focus and maintain equilibrium. Typewriters clicked softly. Pens glided across paper. Lamps cast gentle pools of light, illuminating desks with warm, calm brightness. Nights were particularly still. Streets quieted, distant noises softened into background hums, and offices glowed with the warm reassurance of lamplight. Late-night reflection, careful review of correspondence, and the slow drafting of notes allowed diplomats to close the day with intention. Sleep arrived gently afterward, the body and mind soothed by a day spent in patience, observation, and careful engagement with the world. Even as decades passed and the political landscape shifted subtly, the essential nature of diplomatic life remained unchanged. Patience, attention, and quiet endurance were the tools that sustained them. Their influence was often invisible, yet it shaped communication, understanding, and stability in ways that could never be fully recorded in public history. As you lie here, allow yourself to feel the gentle unfolding of these routines. Picture the soft light falling across polished desks, the quiet streets observed from embassy windows, and the calm flow of daily life marked by patience and attentiveness. Let the measured rhythm of these long, steady days carry you deeper into rest, guiding your thoughts toward peaceful, uninterrupted sleep. The quiet work of diplomats was mirrored in the spaces they inhabited. Offices were arranged with careful attention to detail, desks cleared of clutter, papers stacked in precise order, lamps casting warm circles of light across surfaces. Windows overlooked streets or courtyards, offering glimpses of daily life moving at its own unhurried pace. Every element of these rooms, furniture, lighting, even the soft hum of heating systems, contributed to a sense of calm that allowed the mind to remain focused yet relaxed. In the afternoons, many diplomats took moments for solitary reflection. Some wandered slowly through embassy gardens, noticing the subtle changes in foliage as seasons turned. Leaves unfurling in spring, the bright warmth of summer blooms, the gentle decay of autumnal colors, or the quiet hush of snow in winter. All these provided a natural rhythm, a reminder that life progressed steadily, regardless of the tensions that existed outside. Other afternoons were spent quietly in libraries or personal reading rooms. Shelves lined with books, histories, biographies, literature, offered both knowledge and a soothing consistency. Pages were turned slowly, words absorbed at leisure, sentences reread for understanding or simply for their soft cadence. The act of reading became almost meditative, a gentle companion to the day's work and the subtle practice of attentiveness. Evenings were structured around calm, deliberate activities. Dinner was often modest, prepared with care and consumed without rush. Conversation flowed quietly, focusing on daily life, observations, and neutral topics. Music might play softly in the background, its gentle tones harmonizing with the quiet rhythm of the room. Letters were sometimes written, drafts revised thoughtfully, words chosen carefully to convey tone without haste. These routines reinforced a sense of stability, creating a bridge between the demands of professional life and the restorative quiet needed for rest. Travel, though frequent, was approached with methodical care. Suitcases were packed efficiently, schedules reviewed and memorized. An arrival in new cities was always followed by quiet observation. Streets, shops, and familiar landmarks were noted with patience. Diplomats adjusted gradually, blending observation with subtle adaptation, ensuring that even in a foreign environment, the pace of life remained steady and predictable. Children and spouses adapted naturally to these patterns. Play was gentle and observant. Learning was subtle, often absorbed by watching the rhythm of adult life. Families became a quiet network of support and understanding, sharing in the careful attention to nuance, timing, and propriety that defined the household. Together, they created a small sanctuary within the larger, more complex world outside. Nights offered the deepest calm. The city quieted. Streetlights cast gentle reflections on pavements. The hum of distant traffic became a soft background murmur. Lamps illuminated desks and living spaces with warm, steady light. Diplomats might review correspondence one final time, jot down observations, or simply sit in reflection. Each action was deliberate, unhurried, and intended to conclude the day with clarity and quiet satisfaction. Years of this practice reinforced a profound understanding. The most significant influence was often invisible. Small acts, careful observation, measured words, and patient endurance shaped outcomes quietly. Stability was maintained not through grand gestures, but through attention, restraint, and a consistent, gentle presence. As you listen now, imagine yourself moving through these quiet corridors, warm lights spilling softly across polished desks. Picture streets gently observed from high windows, gardens unfolding slowly through the seasons, and evenings settled in calm reflection. Feel the gentle cadence of days marked by patience, observation, and careful attention. Allow this rhythm to guide your mind and body toward deep, untroubled sleep, where each breath carries the softness of a world held steady, moment by gentle moment. Time, in the life of a diplomat, seemed to stretch and fold in unusual ways. Days passed slowly yet purposefully, each one filled with careful observation, measured conversation, and deliberate action. Months accumulated quietly, blending into years that carried subtle changes both in the world and in the rhythms of daily life. Yet despite the ongoing tensions of the Cold War, there was a consistent undercurrent of calm, a steady foundation on which these quiet lives were built. Mornings continued to unfold with gentle ritual. Light filtered softly through curtains, warming the polished surfaces of desks and floors. Coffee, held in hands that had become accustomed to its comforting weight, offered a familiar pause before the day began in earnest. Newspapers and correspondence were examined with care, eyes trained to notice not only what was said, but what was left unsaid. Every detail mattered, no matter how small. Meetings remained exercises in patience and attention. Chairs were arranged neatly, papers placed just so, and conversation moved at a deliberate, unhurried pace. Silence was as meaningful as words. A pause, a subtle gesture, or a glance could carry more weight than pages of prepared statements. Diplomats learned to navigate these spaces with calm precision, using observation as both shield and guide. Afternoons provided the space for quiet reflection. Some diplomats lingered in gardens, observing sunlight shifting through leaves or the delicate movement of flowers in the breeze. Others preferred libraries or offices, where the soft rustle of pages and the occasional click of a typewriter created a meditative rhythm. Reading was slow and intentional, allowing histories, literature, and poetry to settle gently into the mind, reinforcing the quiet steadiness that defined the day. Evenings were marked by deliberate calm. Lamps cast warm light over rooms, creating pools of brightness that invited reflection and relaxation. Dinners were modest but satisfying, consumed with mindful attention. Conversation flowed softly, rarely touching on politics, instead dwelling on neutral observations, shared anecdotes, or the quiet pleasures of ordinary life. Music, low and soothing, often accompanied these moments, blending seamlessly with the natural hum of the world outside. Families adapted gracefully to these routines. Children learned the rhythms of patience and observation, playing quietly, observing adults, and absorbing lessons of calm attention. Spouses nurtured networks of support and companionship, sharing understanding of the demands and subtleties of diplomatic life. Together, they cultivated a sanctuary of gentle stability within the broader complexities of an uncertain world. Travel remained a familiar part of life, approached methodically and without haste. Journeys were planned with care, luggage packed efficiently, and schedules memorized. Arrival in a new city was followed by gentle observation of streets, local customs, and the flow of life. Diplomats adjusted gradually, absorbing nuances before resuming the familiar cadence of work and reflection. Night brought the deepest calm. Cities quieted, distant noises softened, and the warm glow of lamps created spaces for final reflection. Desks were tidied, letters reviewed one last time, and journals filled with observations of the day. The pace was deliberate but unhurried, a final acknowledgement of continuity before sleep arrived. Even as decades passed and the larger world evolved, the essential nature of diplomatic life endured. Patience, careful attention, and quiet endurance remained the most powerful tools. Influence was often invisible, subtle, yet profoundly shaping the channels of communication, understanding, and stability in ways that history may never fully record. As you rest now, allow the steady, measured rhythm of these lives to envelop you. Imagine corridors softly illuminated by lamplight, streets observed quietly from high windows, and gardens unfolding gently through the seasons. Feel the calm, deliberate pace of days filled with patience, observation, and careful action. Let this unhurried cadence carry you gently into sleep, where each breath guides you deeper into peace, and the quiet continuity of life becomes your own. Even as years passed, diplomats developed a deep, almost instinctive awareness of the passage of time. They learned to notice subtle shifts in light, sound, and rhythm, small cues that marked the movement of days and seasons. Morning light falling differently across a polished desk, the muted hum of city traffic as people settled into routine, the soft rustle of papers or curtains. These details became markers of constancy in a world otherwise defined by change and uncertainty. Daily routines were carefully preserved. Breakfasts were slow and deliberate. A warm cup of tea or coffee cradled in the hands, bread torn and savored, newspapers read thoughtfully. Even the simplest acts, pouring a drink, straightening a chair, adjusting a lamp, took on a meditative quality. Each gesture reinforced stability and cultivated a sense of calm readiness for the day ahead. Meetings and professional engagements moved with quiet precision. Words were chosen for clarity and restraint. Pauses held meaning. Gestures carried subtle significance, and even the smallest details, a tilt of the head, a careful note taken, were observed attentively. Diplomats became skilled at reading between lines, sensing intentions, and maintaining a gentle balance in communication. Patience was as important as eloquence. Afternoons often offered quiet reprieve. Gardens, courtyards, and nearby parks provided spaces for reflective observation. Light shifted slowly through leaves, flowers opened and closed with subtle rhythm, and the distant murmur of life carried a soft reassurance. Other afternoons were spent in libraries or reading rooms, where the turning of pages and faint scratching of pens created a soothing, measured tempo. Literature, history, and poetry became companions, their narratives echoing the gentle unfolding of life itself. Evenings were a sanctuary of calm. Lamps glowed softly, creating a warm, steady light across desks and tables. Dinner was consumed with mindful attention, simple dishes enjoyed slowly. Conversations remained understated and gentle, rarely touching contentious topics, instead offering reflection, storytelling, or neutral observation. Music, low and unobtrusive, drifted through rooms, accompanying the soft cadence of domestic life. Children and families adapted seamlessly to this lifestyle. Play was quiet, often imaginative and observant. Lessons were absorbed from watching adults navigate patience, attentiveness, and careful action. Spouses supported one another through understated networks of companionship, sharing the understanding that calm, deliberate living was essential to sustaining both work and home life. Together, they cultivated a private sanctuary of gentle stability. Travel, though frequent, was navigated with methodical care. Preparations were meticulous, journeys executed with quiet efficiency, and arrival in a new city accompanied by careful observation. Streets, shops, and local customs were noted, absorbed slowly, and incorporated into the rhythm of daily life. Adjustment was gradual and considered, allowing continuity of routine even in unfamiliar surroundings. Writing remained a central, grounding practice. Reports, letters, and notes were composed with precision, often revised multiple times for tone and clarity. The act of writing became meditative, a soft rhythm to complement the steady pace of daily life. The click of typewriters, the glide of pens on paper, and the soft shuffle of documents created a quiet soundtrack, reinforcing focus, discipline, and calm. Night brought the deepest tranquility. The city outside softened into shadows and distant murmurs. Lamps illuminated desks and rooms with warm, gentle light. Diplomats might review notes one last time, jot reflections in a journal, or simply sit in quiet thought. Every action, no matter how small, was deliberate and unhurried, marking the close of another day lived with patience and attentive care. Even as the larger world evolved, the core of diplomatic life, observation, restraint, quiet endurance, remained unchanged. Influence was subtle, often invisible, yet it shaped channels of understanding and stability in ways that were profound. Small acts, careful listening, measured words, and gentle presence maintained a thread of continuity through decades of geopolitical tension. As you lie here now, allow the soft cadence of this life to envelop you. Imagine quiet corridors, gentle pools of lamplight on polished desks, and streets observed from high windows. Feel the slow unfolding of days, measured by patience, reflection, and calm attentiveness. Let this gentle rhythm carry you deeper into rest, allowing sleep to arrive softly, steadily, and completely, wrapped in the quiet, enduring rhythm of a world held with care. The passing of decades brought subtle changes to the life of a diplomat, yet the underlying rhythm remained steady. Days were measured by routines and rituals that anchored them in both space and time. Morning light continued to shift gradually across polished desks, signaling the start of another day of measured attention. The soft clink of cups, the gentle rustle of newspapers, and the distant hum of streets below created a familiar backdrop, grounding diplomats in continuity even as the wider world changed. Afternoons offered a continuation of gentle attentiveness. Some diplomats lingered in gardens, observing sunlight filtering through leaves, flowers opening slowly to the sun, or the slight movements of birds settling briefly on branches. Others preferred quiet offices or libraries, reading slowly, absorbing histories, literature, or poetry. Each page turned, each observation noted, contributed to a sense of calm understanding, reinforcing the gentle cadence of their days. Meetings remained exercises in patience and observation. Words were carefully measured, gestures noted with subtlety, and silences embraced for the meanings they carried. Every interaction was deliberate, designed to maintain continuity and preserve calm. Diplomats became adept at navigating these spaces, understanding that quiet, measured attention often accomplished more than forceful expression. Evenings offered a sanctuary of domestic calm. Lamps glowed softly, casting warm light across rooms and illuminating desks with gentle clarity. Dinner was simple, eaten slowly, with conversation focused on reflection, observation, and connection rather than urgency or conflict. Music, faint and soothing, often accompanied these moments, blending seamlessly into the soft rhythm of domestic life. Letters were written with care, words chosen thoughtfully to communicate tone and intent. Families adapted gracefully to this measured life. Children learned through quiet observation, absorbing lessons of patience, attentiveness, and subtle social navigation. Spouses cultivated networks of companionship and support, understanding that endurance and calm were essential to maintaining equilibrium. Together, households became sanctuaries of continuity, providing stability and care amidst a larger, complex world. Travel, though frequent, was approached with deliberate calm. Suitcases were packed efficiently, schedules carefully reviewed, and journeys executed with thoughtful precision. Arrival in new cities required observation of streets, customs, and local life, all absorbed slowly and carefully integrated into daily routines. Adjustment was gradual and gentle, allowing the familiar rhythms of life to continue even in foreign environments. Writing, both professional and personal, remained central. Reports, letters, and journals were crafted with attention to detail, revised carefully, and read multiple times. The act of writing itself became a meditative rhythm, reinforcing calm, focus, and continuity. Typewriters clicked softly, pens glided across paper, and the occasional shuffle of documents created a quiet symphony that underpinned the gentle cadence of daily life. Night brought the deepest stillness. Streets quieted, distant sounds softened, and rooms glowed with gentle lamplight. Diplomats often spent these hours reviewing correspondence, jotting notes, or reflecting quietly. Actions were unhurried, deliberate, and meant to close the day with calm clarity. The rhythm of daily life, steady and continuous, guided both body and mind toward rest. Even as the Cold War slowly receded, the habits of quiet observation, restraint, and patient endurance remained. Influence was subtle, often invisible, yet profoundly shaping communication, understanding, and stability. Small, deliberate acts carried through days, weeks, and years created continuity in a world defined by change and uncertainty. Now, as you listen, allow yourself to be enveloped by this slow, steady rhythm. Picture soft lamplight over polished desks, quiet corridors, and streets gently observed from high windows. Feel the gentle unfolding of days, measured by attention, patience, and quiet reflection. Let the steady cadence of these long, careful years carry you deeper into rest, guiding your mind and body into sleep, unhurried and complete, wrapped in the serene persistence of a world held with care. Over time, diplomats came to understand that their influence was rarely seen, yet it was always present. Every carefully worded report, every quiet observation, every deliberate conversation contributed to a network of understanding that stretched invisibly across borders. Success was measured not in dramatic announcements or public acclaim, but in the preservation of calm, continuity, and steady communication. Mornings continued their gentle rhythm. Light filtered softly through curtains, illuminating rooms with a quiet warmth. Coffee or tea, held in attentive hands, provided a moment of pause before the day's measured work began. Newspapers, memos, and correspondence were examined with quiet focus. Eyes trained to notice subtleties, changes in phrasing, missing details, or the arrival of an unexpected report, absorbed information slowly, building a mosaic of understanding one careful observation at a time. Afternoons offered space for observation and reflection. Some diplomats walked through embassy gardens or nearby streets, noting the subtle movement of leaves, the quiet passage of pedestrians, or the delicate play of sunlight and shadow. Others spent hours in libraries, reading slowly and absorbing the cadence of written words. Historical narratives, biographies, and literature offered both knowledge and a gentle rhythm, reinforcing the calm pace of life. Meetings, formal or informal, unfolded with deliberate care. Chairs arranged neatly, papers positioned thoughtfully, and conversations conducted at a gentle pace. Silence was respected, gestures were noted, and pauses held meaning. Diplomats moved through these interactions with patience, understanding that careful attention and observation often achieved more than forceful action or immediate reaction. Evenings provided moments of domestic serenity. Lamps glowed softly, casting warm, steady light across rooms. Dinner was simple and deliberate, often shared with family or close colleagues. Conversations were quiet, focusing on daily life, reflection, or neutral observations. Music, low and unobtrusive, filled spaces with calm. Letters and notes were written with care, each word chosen deliberately, supporting the continuity and stability that defined the rhythm of life. Children learned patience and attentiveness naturally, observing the calm, deliberate movements of adults. Spouses cultivated subtle networks of companionship and support, offering both practical and emotional balance. Together, families created spaces of gentle stability within a world that demanded constant observation and careful engagement. Travel punctuated the rhythm without disrupting it. Journeys were approached with methodical care. Luggage was packed efficiently, schedules carefully reviewed, and arrival in a new city followed by slow observation. Streets, markets, and cultural nuances were absorbed gradually, integrated seamlessly into daily routines, ensuring continuity of pace and focus even amidst change. Writing remained central, a thread that wove the days together. Reports, letters, and journals were crafted meticulously, revised with care, and reread with attention. The physicality of writing, the glide of a pen, the soft clack of a typewriter, added to the steady cadence of work, reinforcing focus and calm. These acts of deliberate attention became anchors, shaping thought and maintaining equilibrium. Nights were filled with quiet reflection. The city outside softened into shadows and muted sounds. Lamps illuminated workspaces, casting gentle pools of light. Diplomats reviewed correspondence, wrote notes, or simply sat in quiet thought. Every action was deliberate, a measured end to the day's steady rhythm. Sleep followed naturally, guided by the calm structure that had defined the hours before. Even as the world evolved and the Cold War drew toward its close, the essence of diplomatic life, patience, observation, restraint, and quiet endurance, remained unchanged. Influence continued to flow subtly through measured words, careful listening, and the persistent presence of those who understood that the softest touches often shaped the greatest outcomes. As you rest now, allow yourself to be carried by this gentle rhythm. Picture soft lamplight, quiet corridors, and gardens shifting slowly through the seasons. Feel, and streets observed with calm attentiveness. Let the rhythm of these steady, deliberate days guide your own breath, your own mind, and your body toward deep, restful sleep, where each moment is unhurried and peace settles softly around you. The flow of days for a diplomat was both steady and subtle, a rhythm learned and refined over years. Every morning began gently, with soft lights spilling across rooms, illuminating polished desks, bookshelves, and carefully stacked papers. Coffee or tea warmed the hands and offered a quiet moment of pause before the day's gentle engagement with correspondence, reports, and observations. Eyes trained to notice the smallest details scanned letters and newspapers with patience, attentive to changes in tone, phrasing, or timing. Tiny signals that could carry meaning far beyond the words themselves. Afternoons offered spaces for quiet reflection. Some diplomats wandered slowly through gardens, observing the gradual movements of leaves, the soft flutter of petals, or the way sunlight shifted across stone paths. Others remained indoors, nestled in libraries or offices, where the sound of turning pages, the faint scratch of pen on paper, and the soft hum of the building became a steady backdrop. Reading history, literature, and poetry became a gentle companion, a way to absorb knowledge at a calm, deliberate pace, mirroring the measured rhythm of daily life. Meetings, whether formal or informal, continued with careful restraint. Conversation moved deliberately, with pauses respected and gestures noted. Diplomats navigated these interactions with patience, understanding that subtle observation and gentle communication often accomplished more than direct action or immediate results. The flow of discussion was like a slow dance, measured, intentional, and quiet, where every word and silence held significance. Evenings were marked by domestic calm. Lamps glowed softly, casting warm light across rooms, desks, and dining tables. Dinner was simple, eaten slowly, with conversation focusing on gentle reflection, shared observations, or light stories. Music, low and unobtrusive, often accompanied these moments, blending seamlessly with the soft cadence of the evening. Letters were sometimes written, notes carefully crafted, each word chosen to maintain clarity, calm, and continuity. Children adapted naturally to the rhythms of life. Play was often quiet, reflective, or imaginative, absorbed through observation of adults. Lessons in patience, subtlety, and attentiveness became part of everyday experience. Spouses formed networks of support and companionship, sharing understanding of the careful balance between work, domestic life, and the quiet demands of diplomacy. Together, families nurtured an enduring sense of calm, stability, and sanctuary within a world that was sometimes unpredictable. Travel remained an accepted part of life, approached with methodical care. Journeys were meticulously planned, luggage packed efficiently, and schedules memorized. Arrival in a new city was always followed by careful observation of streets, markets, and local customs, absorbed gradually and integrated into daily routines. Adjustment was slow, almost imperceptible, ensuring continuity even in unfamiliar environments. Writing remained a constant, grounding practice. Reports, letters, and personal journals were crafted with care, revised thoughtfully, and reread multiple times. The act of writing itself became meditative, its rhythm reinforcing focus, patience, and calm. Typewriters clicked softly, pens glided across paper, and the gentle shuffle of documents provided a quiet soundtrack to the measured pace of life. Journals preserved observations, reflections, and the subtle details of daily living that might otherwise be forgotten. Nightfall brought a deeper stillness. The streets softened into shadows, distant sounds became muted, and rooms glowed with warm lamplight. Diplomats often spent these hours reviewing correspondence, jotting down reflections, or sitting quietly in thought. Actions were deliberate and unhurried, closing the day in measured completeness. The steady rhythm of life guided the body and mind towards sleep, a natural conclusion to days filled with careful observation, patient attention, and deliberate presence. Even as decades passed and the broader world evolved, the essence of diplomatic life endured: patient observation, careful communication, and quiet endurance. Influence flowed subtly, often invisible, yet profoundly shaping channels of understanding, stability, and connection. Small acts, deliberate words, and gentle attention wove a continuity that outlasted the urgency of momentary events. As you listen now, allow the calm, measured rhythm of these lives to settle around you. Picture the gentle glow of lamplight, quiet corridors, and streets observed from high windows. Imagine gardens unfolding slowly through the seasons, the soft rustle of leaves, and the muted movements of city life. Let the steady cadence of these days guide your own breath, body, and mind into deep, untroubled sleep, where each moment flows gently, peacefully, and completely. The years folded quietly into one another, each day measured by subtle routines that became the very heartbeat of diplomatic life. Mornings remained a gentle procession, lights spilling softly across polished floors, the faint aroma of coffee or tea warming the air, and papers carefully reviewed with eyes trained to notice the subtlest of shifts. Words, gestures, and even pauses carried meaning, and diplomats absorbed these nuances slowly, almost imperceptibly, building a quiet understanding that stretched across borders and time zones. Afternoons offered spaces for stillness and observation. Gardens and courtyards, no matter how small, became havens of calm. Leaves swayed lightly in the breeze, shadows stretched and shifted, and birds moved in measured grace, each tiny detail grounding the mind in the rhythm of life. Other afternoons were spent indoors, in libraries or offices, surrounded by books whose pages whispered stories of the past. History, literature, and poetry were read slowly, absorbed deliberately, and allowed to settle gently into memory, offering perspective, reflection, and quiet companionship. Meetings continued their understated dance. Chairs were arranged with care, documents positioned thoughtfully, and conversation unfolded with measured attention. Silences were as instructive as words, pauses pregnant with meaning. Diplomats practiced listening with patience, understanding that the most profound influence often flowed not from immediate action, but from careful observation, restrained speech, and the steady consistency of presence. Evenings were calm and deliberate. Soft lamplight pooled over desks, tables, and books. Meals were prepared and enjoyed without hurry, often shared with family or trusted colleagues. Conversations remained gentle, focused on reflection, observation, and subtle storytelling. Music, low and soothing, drifted through spaces, blending with the quiet hum of life beyond windows. Letters were written slowly, words chosen with precision to convey tone, clarity, and care. These routines reinforced continuity, providing both comfort and stability. Children absorbed lessons of patience and attentiveness naturally. Play was quiet, reflective, or imaginative, shaped by the calm presence of adults. Spouses offered mutual support, understanding the demands of a life built on restraint, careful observation, and subtle influence. Together, families nurtured a private sanctuary, a space of measured stability and gentle continuity amidst the broader currents of the world. Travel punctuated the rhythm without disturbing it. Each journey was meticulously planned. Luggage was packed efficiently, schedules reviewed, and arrival in a new city followed by quiet observation. Streets, markets, and customs were noted slowly, absorbed deliberately, and gradually woven into the fabric of daily life. Adjustment was subtle, almost imperceptible, allowing diplomats to maintain the continuity and calm of familiar routines even in unfamiliar surroundings. Writing remained central, a steady anchor. Reports, letters, and journals were drafted with care, revised thoughtfully, and reread to ensure clarity and tone. The act of writing itself became meditative, the gentle glide of a pen, the soft click of a typewriter, and the subtle shuffle of papers reinforced the deliberate pace of daily life. Journals preserved observations, reflections, and minor details of everyday existence, quietly chronicling a life defined by patience, awareness, and continuity. Nightfall brought the deepest stillness. City streets softened into shadows, distant noises faded into muted background hums, and rooms glowed with gentle lamplight. Diplomats reviewed correspondence one final time, made notes, or simply rested in reflection. Every gesture, no matter how small, was deliberate and unhurried, marking the close of a day lived in measured, attentive care. Sleep arrived naturally, carried on the calm rhythm of carefully structured routines. Even as the world evolved, as policies shifted and decades passed, the essence of diplomatic life endured: quiet endurance, patient observation, and thoughtful communication. Influence flowed subtly, often unseen, yet profoundly shaping understanding, stability, and connection across borders. Small, deliberate acts, carefully observed conversations, restrained words, and gentle attention formed the invisible threads that wove continuity into a complex and ever-changing world. As you listen now, allow yourself to be enveloped in this slow, steady cadence. Picture soft lamplight illuminating polished desks, quiet corridors, and streets gently observed from high windows. Imagine gardens unfolding gradually with the seasons, leaves rustling lightly, and birds moving in their gentle rhythm. Let the measured pace of these days, guided by patience, reflection, and attentive presence, carry you deeper into a restful sleep, where each breath is unhurried, each thought soft, and peace settles gently around you. With the passage of time, diplomats became deeply attuned to the subtleties of their environment. Every day was a tapestry woven from small, deliberate actions, a note carefully drafted, a gesture observed, a conversation attended to with patience. Morning light would filter gently across polished floors, tracing patterns on desks stacked with papers and books. The aroma of tea or coffee offered comfort, marking the beginning of another day carried forward with calm attentiveness. Afternoons remained a space for quiet reflection. Some diplomats strolled through embassy gardens, noticing the delicate play of sunlight through leaves, the gentle sway of flowers, or the fleeting shadow of a bird passing overhead. Others lingered indoors, surrounded by bookshelves filled with histories, literature, and poetry. Pages were turned slowly, words absorbed with care, allowing knowledge and tranquility to settle naturally into the mind. These moments reinforced the steady cadence of life, a soft counterbalance to the subtle pressures of diplomacy. Meetings continued with gentle deliberation. Chairs were placed with thought, papers arranged precisely, and conversations conducted at a measured pace. Pauses were noted, gestures observed, and silence respected as meaningful. Diplomats moved through these interactions with patience and awareness, understanding that influence often flowed quietly, through observation, subtle communication, and consistent presence rather than overt action. Evenings brought calm and domestic comfort. Lamps cast a soft, steady glow across rooms, illuminating desks, books, and dining tables. Meals were taken slowly, shared with family or colleagues, and accompanied by gentle conversation. Music, quiet and soothing, drifted through the spaces, blending seamlessly with the soft rhythm of the evening. Letters and notes were composed with careful attention, each word chosen to preserve clarity and maintain a steady, deliberate tone. Children absorbed lessons in patience and attentiveness naturally, learning through quiet observation and participation in the rhythms of life. Spouses nurtured connections and networks of support, creating a sense of balance and continuity. Together, families cultivated spaces of gentle stability, small sanctuaries in which the rhythms of daily life could flow unbroken. Travel, though frequent, was navigated with methodical calm. Preparations were meticulous, schedules planned with care, and arrival in a new city followed by careful observation of streets, markets, and social customs. Adjustment was gradual, allowing diplomats to integrate new surroundings into their routines without disruption. Even amidst change, the steady cadence of daily life persisted. Writing remained a central, grounding practice. Reports, letters, and journals were drafted slowly and thoughtfully, revised to ensure clarity and tone. The soft glide of a pen, the gentle click of a typewriter, and the rustle of papers became a meditative rhythm, reinforcing focus, calm, and attentiveness. Journals preserved observations, reflections, and the subtle details of everyday life, creating a quiet archive of continuity and awareness. Night brought the deepest tranquility. City streets softened into shadows, distant sounds faded to a gentle hum, and rooms glowed with warm lamplight. Diplomats often spent these hours reviewing correspondence, jotting reflections, or simply sitting in quiet thought. Each action was deliberate, marking the close of the day with patience and calm. The rhythm of daily life guided the body and mind naturally into rest, where sleep arrived unhurried and complete. Even as decades passed and the broader world shifted, the essence of diplomatic life endured: careful observation, quiet endurance, and subtle influence. Small acts, attentive listening, and patient presence quietly shaped understanding, stability, and connection across borders. Influence flowed gently, often unseen, yet profoundly impactful over time. As you lie here now, allow the rhythm of these lives to settle over you. Picture soft lamplight illuminating quiet corridors, streets observed gently from high windows, and gardens unfolding slowly with the seasons. Feel the deliberate, unhurried cadence of days shaped by patience, reflection, and attentive observation. Let this gentle, steady rhythm carry you deeper into restful sleep, where every breath is calm, every thought soft, and peace surrounds you completely. With each passing year, diplomats grew ever more attuned to the subtleties of time and environment. Days were measured not by grand events, but by the gentle rhythm of routine. The soft morning light tracing its way across polished floors, the warm aroma of tea or coffee, the quiet shuffle of papers, and the careful reading of letters and reports. Even the smallest gestures, a pen lifted, a notebook opened, a letter folded neatly, carried a sense of purpose and calm. Afternoons often became a space for reflection and gentle observation. Many diplomats lingered in embassy gardens or courtyards, watching the slow movement of shadows across leaves, the subtle sway of flowers in a mild breeze, or the quiet flutter of birds settling briefly on branches. Others preferred indoor spaces, libraries or reading rooms, where the sound of pages turning, the faint scratch of pen on paper, and the soft hum of distant activity formed a serene backdrop. Historical accounts, literature, and poetry were read slowly, absorbed with patience, and allowed to settle gently into the mind, reinforcing the calm, deliberate rhythm of life. Meetings, both formal and informal, unfold with careful deliberation. Chairs were arranged thoughtfully, documents laid out with care, and conversations conducted with quiet attention. Pauses were as significant as words, and gestures often spoke as loudly as sentences. Diplomats understood that influence rarely required urgency. It flowed quietly, through observation, subtle communication, and the consistent presence of patience and attentiveness. Evenings became sanctuaries of calm. Lamps cast soft, steady light over rooms, illuminating desks, tables, and bookshelves. Dinners were prepared and consumed with care, often shared with family or trusted colleagues. Conversation remained gentle, focusing on reflection, observation, and quiet storytelling. Music, low and unobtrusive, drifted through rooms, blending seamlessly with the rhythm of domestic life. Letters were written thoughtfully, words chosen deliberately, reinforcing continuity and calm. Children absorbed the quiet rhythms of life naturally, learning patience, attentiveness, and subtle social navigation by observing adults. Spouses created networks of support, sharing an understanding of the delicate balance between professional duties and domestic harmony. Together, families formed a sanctuary of gentle stability, a small haven within a broader, sometimes unpredictable world. Travel punctuated life without breaking its rhythm. Each journey was approached with careful planning, luggage packed efficiently, and schedules reviewed with quiet precision. Arrival in a new city brought observation and gentle adaptation. Streets, markets, and customs were absorbed slowly and integrated seamlessly into daily routines. Even amidst unfamiliar surroundings, the familiar cadence of work and reflection persisted, providing continuity and calm. Writing remained central, a steady anchor. Reports, letters, and journals were drafted thoughtfully, revised with care, and reread to ensure clarity and tone. The tactile rhythm of writing, the soft glide of pen across paper, the faint click of typewriters, became meditative, reinforcing focus, calm, and attentiveness. Journals preserved reflections and small details of daily life, quietly chronicling a life defined by patience and continuity. Nightfall brought the deepest stillness. Streets softened into shadows, distant sounds faded into muted hums, and rooms glowed with warm lamplight. Diplomats reviewed correspondence one final time, made notes, or simply rested in quiet contemplation. Actions were deliberate, marking the close of the day with calm, measured attention. The rhythm of daily life guided the mind and body gently toward rest, allowing sleep to arrive naturally, unhurried, and complete. Even as decades passed and the world outside evolved, the essence of diplomatic life remained unchanged: quiet endurance, patient observation, and subtle influence. Small, deliberate acts, careful listening, measured words, attentive presence, wove continuity into a complex, shifting world. Influence flowed gently, often invisible, yet profoundly impactful across time and space. As you rest now, feel the soft cadence of this life wrap around you. Picture quiet corridors bathed in lamplight, streets observed from high windows, gardens unfolding gradually through the seasons. Allow the measured pace of these days, marked by patience, reflection, and attentive presence, to guide you deeper into restful sleep, where each breath is unhurried, every thought soft, and peace settles gently, fully, and completely. Time, in the life of a diplomat, seemed to flow like a quiet river, steady, gentle, and persistent. Each day brought its familiar rhythms: morning light spilling softly across polished floors, the comforting aroma of tea or coffee, the careful handling of letters and documents, and the deliberate reading of newspapers and reports. Even the smallest actions, a pen lifted, a page turned, a letter folded neatly, became part of the subtle, calming choreography of daily life. Afternoons often offered a space for gentle observation. Some diplomats wandered through embassy gardens, watching shadows stretch slowly across leaves, petals flutter softly in the breeze, or birds alight briefly on branches. Others lingered indoors, in libraries or offices, where the soft rustle of pages and faint scratch of pens created a soothing, meditative rhythm. Reading history, literature, and poetry became a way to slow down, to absorb knowledge and perspective at a gentle, deliberate pace. Meetings moved with understated elegance. Chairs were arranged thoughtfully, documents positioned with care, and conversation unfolded at a measured pace. Pauses were respected, gestures noted, and silences held meaning. Diplomats understood that influence rarely required urgency. It flowed subtly through patient observation, quiet communication, and steady, attentive presence. Evenings were a sanctuary of calm. Lamps cast warm, gentle light across rooms, desks, and dining tables. Meals were consumed slowly, shared with family or trusted colleagues, and accompanied by quiet conversation. Music, low and unobtrusive, drifted softly through spaces, blending with the natural hum of life beyond windows. Letters were written thoughtfully, words chosen deliberately, reinforcing continuity, patience, and calm. Children learned patience and attentiveness by absorbing the gentle rhythms around them. Play was quiet and reflective, often imaginative, and shaped by observation of adults. Spouses nurtured support networks, understanding the delicate balance between professional responsibilities and domestic harmony. Together, families created sanctuaries of stability, offering spaces of gentle continuity within a complex, shifting world. Travel punctuated life, but never disrupted its rhythm. Each journey was approached methodically, with careful packing, planned schedules, and attentive observation. Arrival in a new city demanded quiet adaptation. Streets, markets, and customs were noted and integrated slowly into daily routines. The familiar cadence of work and reflection persisted even in unfamiliar surroundings, providing a sense of continuity and calm. Writing remained a central anchor, grounding the day. Reports, letters, and journals were crafted with care, revised thoughtfully, and reread with attention to tone and clarity. The soft glide of pen on paper, the faint click of typewriters, and the shuffle of documents became a meditative soundtrack, reinforcing patience, focus, and calm. Journals preserved reflections, subtle observations, and the minutiae of daily life, quietly chronicling the enduring rhythm of diplomatic existence. Nightfall brought the deepest stillness. Streets softened into shadows, distant sounds faded into muted hums, and rooms glowed with gentle lamplight. Diplomats reviewed correspondence one last time, made final notes, or simply sat in reflective quiet. Every movement was deliberate, unhurried, and thoughtful, marking the close of a day lived with measured attention. Sleep followed naturally, guided by the steady cadence of these quiet routines. Even as decades passed and the world changed, the essence of diplomatic life remained constant: quiet endurance, patient observation, and subtle influence. Small, deliberate acts, attentive listening, carefully chosen words, and consistent presence wove continuity into a complex and evolving world. Influence flowed gently, often invisible, yet profoundly shaping understanding and stability over time. As you lie here now, let the soft cadence of this life surround you. Picture lamplight glowing across quiet corridors, streets observed with gentle attention from high windows, and gardens unfolding slowly through the seasons. Allow the rhythm of these steady, deliberate days to carry you deeper into restful sleep, where every breath is calm, each thought soft, and peace settles fully, completely, and quietly around you. Decades of life and diplomacy fostered a profound awareness of subtlety, rhythm, and quiet endurance. Each day was a carefully observed progression, marked by gestures both small and deliberate. Morning light would spill softly across polished floors, illuminating desks stacked with papers and books, while the gentle aroma of coffee or tea marked the beginning of the day's measured routines. Even the smallest acts, turning a page, straightening a letter, lifting a pen, carried with them a quiet mindfulness that anchored diplomats in the present. Afternoons often became a time for reflection and attentive observation. Gardens and courtyards offered spaces for calm, where leaves swayed in gentle breezes, shadows shifted slowly across paths, and birds paused momentarily on branches. Indoors, offices and libraries were filled with the soft rustle of pages and the faint scratch of pens. Reading historical texts, literature, and poetry became a deliberate act of both learning and relaxation, a rhythm that mirrored the measured cadence of life itself. Meetings, whether formal or informal, unfolded with careful attention. Chairs were arranged thoughtfully, documents positioned with precision, and conversation moved at a slow, deliberate pace. Pauses were noted, gestures observed, and silences carried meaning. Diplomats understood that influence often flowed quietly, through observation, careful listening, and the patient presence of steady attention, rather than through overt action or urgency. Evenings were a sanctuary of gentle calm. Lamps cast soft pools of light over desks, tables, and bookshelves. Meals were prepared and consumed without rush, often shared with family or trusted colleagues. Conversation remained quiet and deliberate, focused on reflection, observation, and gentle storytelling. Music, subtle and unobtrusive, drifted through rooms, harmonizing with the natural hum of the evening. Letters were written slowly, words chosen with care to maintain clarity, tone, and calm, reinforcing the continuity of daily life. Children absorbed the unhurried rhythm of life naturally, learning patience, attentiveness, and subtle social navigation by observing the quiet movements and behaviors of adults. Spouses nurtured a network of support and companionship, balancing domestic harmony with the demands of professional life. Together, families cultivated spaces of gentle stability, offering a quiet sanctuary amidst the broader uncertainties of the world. Travel punctuated the routine, approached methodically and without haste. Each journey was meticulously planned, luggage packed efficiently, schedules reviewed carefully, An arrival in a new city followed by deliberate observation. Streets, markets, and customs were absorbed gradually and integrated seamlessly into daily life. Adjustment was subtle, almost imperceptible, allowing familiar routines to continue even in unfamiliar surroundings, maintaining the overall rhythm and calm of life. Writing remained a central, grounding practice. Reports, letters, and journals were crafted with meticulous attention, revised thoughtfully, and reread to ensure clarity and tone. The tactile rhythm of writing, the soft glide of pen across paper, the faint click of typewriters, and the shuffle of documents became meditative, reinforcing focus, patience, and calm. Journals preserved subtle observations, reflections, and small details of everyday existence, quietly chronicling the steady, enduring life of diplomacy. Nightfall brought the deepest tranquility. Streets softened into shadows, distant sounds faded into muted hums, and rooms glowed with warm, steady lamplight. Diplomats often spent these hours reviewing correspondence one last time, making notes, or sitting quietly in reflection. Every gesture, no matter how small, was deliberate, marking the close of a day lived in patient, attentive care. Sleep followed naturally, nurtured by the quiet rhythm of daily life, offering rest and renewal for the day ahead. Even as decades passed and the world evolved around them, the core of diplomatic life endured: quiet endurance, patient observation, and subtle influence. Small, deliberate acts, careful listening, measured words, attentive presence, wove continuity and calm into a world defined by complexity and change. Influence flowed gently, often unseen, yet profoundly shaped understanding, stability, and connection over time. As you lie here now, allow the slow, steady cadence of this life to surround you. Picture quiet corridors bathed in lamplight, streets observed from high windows, and gardens unfolding gradually through the seasons. Feel the unhurried rhythm of days shaped by patience, reflection, and attentive presence. Let this gentle, deliberate pace carry you deeper into restful sleep, where each breath is calm, every thought soft, and peace settles fully and completely around you. Time, in the life of a diplomat, unfolded like a slow, deliberate river, carrying moments gently along without haste. Each day followed familiar, soothing rhythms. Morning light spilling softly across polished desks, the subtle aroma of tea or coffee warming the air, and the quiet handling of letters, reports, and newspapers. Even the smallest gestures, a pen lifted, a page turned, a letter folded carefully, held a sense of calm mindfulness, anchoring the mind in the present. Afternoons offered spaces for reflection and gentle attentiveness. Gardens and courtyards became havens of quiet, where leaves swayed in mild breezes, shadows moved slowly across paths, and birds paused delicately on branches. Inside, offices and libraries were filled with the soft, familiar sounds of pages turning and pens scratching on paper. Reading history, literature, or poetry became a meditative rhythm, absorbed slowly and deliberately, reinforcing the calm cadence of daily life. Meetings unfolded with patience and understated precision. Chairs were body, daytime experiences, gentle walks, reading, quiet conversation, the care of household tasks, carried their influence into the night, shaping the mind's preparation for rest. Even minor actions, performed with intention, created a framework for ease. Folding clothes, arranging the bed, or brushing hair were acts of quiet ritual that signaled readiness for calm, restorative sleep. Dreams themselves reflected this layered interplay. Early night dreams often mirrored recent events in softened, symbolic form. A conversation revisited, a minor worry transformed, or a simple walk through a familiar neighborhood reframed in gentle, imaginative ways. As the night deepened, dreams expanded into richer sequences, exploring memory, emotion, and imagination. A garden might shift subtly from day to day, a path might curve unexpectedly, or familiar faces might appear transformed, carrying nuance and quiet reflection. These dreams were patient, immersive, and restorative, offering the mind a private space in which to process, explore, and reflect while the body rested. Even the smallest elements of the physical environment played a role. The texture of a quilt, the softness of a pillow, the faint warmth of a candle or fire, or the gentle draft of evening air contributed to the mind's receptivity to rest. Nighttime rituals reinforced these cues, signaling the mind and body to relax. Brushing hair, washing hands and face, adjusting nightwear, or carefully arranging bedding were acts of preparation, reinforcing the gentle transition from wakefulness to sleep. Ambient sounds formed a subtle, guiding background. Urban sleepers absorbed the faint rattle of carriages, distant footsteps, or the low hum of gas lamps. Rural sleepers heard rustling leaves, nocturnal birds, or the gentle trickle of water. Domestic sounds, breathing companions, soft movements of pets, or the settling of furniture were integrated into the unconscious, shaping dreams, reinforcing comfort and maintaining continuity throughout the night. Shared sleep, common in many households, introduced a soft social dimension. Children's dreams might echo the presence of elders. Adults unconsciously absorbed cues from companions. Pets quietly reinforced reassurance with their presence. Each layer contributed to a subtle communal rhythm, while preserving the privacy and intimacy of individual dream worlds. Health and bodily sensation shaped both sleep and dreaming. Fever or discomfort produced more vivid or restless dreams, while exhaustion led to slower, reflective, or nearly dreamless sleep, leaving the body replenished. Victorians observed these patterns carefully, recognizing the active role of sleep in physical restoration and emotional equilibrium. Diet continued to guide nocturnal life. Light evening meals and gentle herbal teas supported calm digestion and smooth dreaming. Heavy foods, rich sauces, and stimulants introduced restlessness or fragmented sleep. These practices reflected a holistic understanding of rest, emphasizing coordination between body, mind, and environment. As the night progressed, dreams unfolded in layered complexity. Early sequences reflected immediate experiences or emotions, while later sequences explored symbolic, reflective, or emotional terrain. Recurring imagery, a winding street, a familiar garden, a gentle figure, a domestic interior, appeared across nights, forming subtle patterns that guided reflection and insight. These motifs were observed with curiosity, serving as quiet markers of the mind's ongoing work, rather than dramatic portents. Even brief awakenings were integrated naturally into the night. Gentle shifts, small stretches, or soft attention to surroundings allowed sleep to resume smoothly. Patience and acceptance guided these moments, in alignment with the Victorian belief that restorative sleep was most effective when approached gently, without force. Through all of this, the intertwined rhythms of breath, movement, thought, sensation, and environment continued in a seamless, patient, unbroken flow. Night after night, these patterns carried the sleeper through restorative cycles and layered dreams, shaping consciousness and memory with quiet diligence, endlessly moving forward through the soft, deep, unhurried hours of darkness, without conclusion, without pause. And now, as the night stretches quietly around you, feel the soft weight of your body sinking into your bed. Let your limbs release, one by one, as though the mattress itself is gently holding and supporting you. Notice the calm rhythm of your breath, slow and steady, flowing in and out with ease, carrying you further into this gentle night. Imagine yourself surrounded by the quiet, tender world of a Victorian bedroom, the muted glow of a candle, the soft folds of a quilt, the faint warmth of a fire. Everything around you is still. Everything is patient. The world has slowed, and you are invited to move slowly with it, to drift gently through time without hurry, without thought. Feel the hush of the night settle over you like a soft blanket. Allow each sound, the whisper of air through a window, the gentle sigh of the house settling, the quiet breathing of companions or pets, to become part of the rhythm that guides your mind into rest. Nothing is urgent. Nothing needs attention. Every small detail, every soft movement, is simply part of the calm current carrying you forward. Let your thoughts float freely, without effort, like leaves drifting along a gentle stream. If any worry or tension appears, notice it, and then let it glide away. Each inhalation brings relaxation. Each exhalation releases everything that does not belong to this peaceful night. You are safe. You are held. You are exactly where you need to be. The dreams of the night are waiting for you now. Perhaps they will echo the whispers of the Victorian world you have visited, quiet reflections, familiar scenes, gentle figures. Perhaps they will be entirely your own, filled with soft colors, slow motion, and serene landscapes. Either way, they will carry you deeper, guiding you into restorative rest, moving you effortlessly along the gentle current of night. And as you drift, remember, you do not need to understand these dreams. You do not need to hold on to them. Simply allow them to flow, like a quiet river passing beneath a moonlit sky. Let your body soften. Let your mind soften. Let your awareness fade into the calm, tender rhythm that surrounds you. Night deepens. Breathing continues, steady and slowed. The world is hushed, and you are drifting. Let the calm carry you fully now. Let it flow over your shoulders, down your arms, into your legs, filling every part of you with softness and ease. Let sleep take you gently, without interruption, without effort, moving you into quiet, restorative darkness. And now, as your eyes close completely, as your mind releases, and as your body settles into perfect stillness, allow the night, and your dreams, and this gentle, flowing calm to carry you all the way into rest. Sleep is here. Peace is here. And now, quietly, you can drift completely,